Now, changing in the spending, consumption grew steadily as a share of GDP from 1970 to 2012, which makes sense. The country is further developing and developing. People are becoming rich and they want to enjoy their wealth more. And at the same time, the country is already like developed. So there is like, what are they going to do in terms of investment? They already have a truck, they already have a tractor, farmers already have what they need, roads have already been built, airports have been built. What else do you want to? So richer countries, they experience a sharp decline in their investment. And we'll talk about later that why this happens, because the rent on investment, or as we also call it, rate of return on investment, goes down. Investment is much more volatile than other components of GDP. Government purchases have steadily remained around 20% of the GDP in the last 50 years after it rose. And in 1970, it reached like 20 something percent. And ever since 1970s, it more or less has been steadily, very slowly increasing, but it's still around 20%. Sometimes also during the 90s, during President Clinton's, it fell. It actually fell. The government became much tinier. Net exports have been negative, as we talked about. The United States differ from other countries by having the highest share of GDP going to consumption. Again, because much richer country and lower tax rate and everything, and also net exports being negative. The lowest share of investment, many people don't like it as well. Net exports being negative could be because of the multinational corporations underreporting their intermediate goods, plus all the moving out because of globalization, moving out of the supply chain. By contrast, China has the lowest share of consumption, the highest share of investment, and the largest share of net exports. In the last, I think 20 years, like 20, 30 years, they were constantly expanding the economy, and therefore consumption has been historically low, and it was kind of kept low. Again, some are saying that it's too low, like whites is still low. And investment has been very high, which is a great thing. And of course, largest share of net exports. One can only expect that in future, consumption will go up. Therefore, net exports will go down. And what happens to investment? That remains to be seen in China. Now you can see here, this is the comparison between many countries: United States, United Kingdom, Great Britain, Italy, India, France, Germany, Canada, and China. You can see United States has a very high rate of consumption rate, also followed by all the other rich countries, and India. This is not this is actually one of the problems of the Indian economy, that this their investment comparable is too low and their government expenditure is too high for a country like India, which is developing and it needs to rapidly develop. This doesn't look like a really good thing. But you can see investment in the United States, it's lower than the United Kingdom, Italy, but it's even higher than India. Again, very troubling here for India. France investment is very high, which is very interesting. I did not expect that. Germany, high, a little, around 20. Canada, around 20. And China, very high, more than 50%. That's That's amazing. That's amazing. 50% is going to investment. That means only good things are going to happen, like in the future. That's amazing. When it comes to government expenditure, very interesting. You see, many people think that, for example, in Europe, the government needs to be like super huge because you get all the free services like free healthcare, education, free this, free that. But if you look at this, you can see that United States economy has 20% of the total GDP belonging to the federal government. And in European countries, it's lower than 20%. So, for example, the government in the United Kingdom is actually smaller than the US economy, which is very interesting. I couldn't find an explanation for that. Like, this is the US government's expenditure. You can see that healthcare, education, pensions, and defense is not that sizable, and welfare is basically just very tiny. So I couldn't find an explanation. I tried to study a little about the US healthcare system. I couldn't. That it was like so complicated. I was like, yep, not for me. Let someone else deal with that. Very complicated. So this is very interesting. The US government is actually bigger than Italy's and France. All like France is a very big government. Lots of socialist parties involved in French politics. Germany as well, lots of left-wing parties are involved. And you can see that their governments are still smaller. This difference could be defense budget. Canada is bigger, and China, even China, which is like a communist government, lots of huge corporations are still owned by the government itself, and lots of like the public sector is huge there, but it still has a tinier government, it's a smaller government. Very interesting. And of course, you can see that net exports are negative in rich countries, with the exception of Germany, which is actually a problem between Americans and Germans. They're saying that Germans need to start buying a lot more things from us. Now, measuring GDP, the income approach. From until now, we talked about measuring GDP by looking at the expenditures. Now, this time we're looking at GDP from the opposite directions. Remember, income always equals expenditure. You must have money to be able to spend money, right? So up until now, we talked about expenditures. Now we're talking about income. Before we start, do we have any questions from these parts? We talked about different components of the GDP and everything. If there was any questions. Now, let's continue. Now, compensation of employees, that's their wages and salaries and benefits. Corporate profits, other income like self-employed or family businesses, royalty income, all the income of the economy. How can you make money in the economy? Think about this. How can I make money? I can go to work, which will be my salary. I'll make money in terms of my salary. I can own a business for myself. That's a private, like a small business, self-employed, and then make money from that business. I can own a corporation, or at least a portion of a corporation, as stocks in a corporation. Profit after taxes of corporations. These profits will either be dividends that I'm going to get from owning the stocks, or will be an increase in my stock prices. There is no difference. When, for example, a corporation made like $100 million of profits, that $100 million will either go to the stockholders as dividends or goes back into the company, is invested back into the company, and then materialize in terms of higher stock prices of the company. So the company's stock prices will, like in total, go up by $100 million. No money is wasted or no money is conjured up from heaven. It's all either dividend or an increase in stock value. Now, other income, royalty, for example, if you write a song or something and you get money selling it. Net interest earned by individuals. If you lend money to someone and you're making interest on the on the debts they owe you, all of that. Now, there is an issue here in the GDP accounting. We have depreciation. Every year, those things that we used to have will lose their value. The loss of value of capital from wear and tear. For example, in 2010, I bought a tractor. Now it's 2021. That tractor is no longer brand new and awesome. It's older. I have to probably change a part, or I don't know, fix this part or that part. That means that the value of the tractor is no longer the same value that it was when I bought it. It went down. GDP minus depreciation. Net factor income is when we're talking about GDP, for example. It's the money that paid to US residents by foreigners minus the money or the income paid by US residents to foreigners. That's net factor income. As you can see here, the income approach. Depreciation is 15%. This is very important. This is why many say that investment rate in the US economy is a problem, because we're not replacing even though the countries are developed, we are not replacing all the stuff that are being depreciated and are getting really old that as fast. That's why, for example, right now we have this huge argument on an infrastructure bill, that many of these roads and these bridges and everything, airports, train stations, they're really old. You need to change them. For example, when I came here, I thought that it's in the United States, I was not familiar with the system. So I took the train from Charlotte to Raleigh often, and the train is always late. It's always late, like 2 hours, 1 hour. I almost got in trouble with my classes that one semester, which I had to travel by train from Charlotte to Raleigh. How can this be possible? You buy a plane ticket that says you're going to get to Raleigh in 9:30, and every time you have 30-minute delay, 1 hour delay. And then I realized that the system here is different. So you have to drive yourself or take a plane at least. Take a plane, please. So this depreciation is a huge part. See, 15%. It needs to be replaced. Compensation of employees, wage earners, more than half, around half. Corporate profits, this is also very interesting. It's only 13%, less than 13. Other income, small businesses, 20%. You may think that, okay, the the economy is completely owned by these huge corporations, but they're actually very tiny. If you go for the 500 or like the biggest corporations, I think that would be much tinier. The main part of the economy is still small businesses. Very interesting. I'm guessing this number now is much lower though. After COVID lockdowns, especially, many small businesses were just wiped out. Yeah, national income, compensation of employees plus other income plus corporate profits. Now, gross national income, GNP, it's the same as GDP, but instead of focusing on the domestic, we focus on nationals, American citizens, or I don't know if residents like green card holders are also included. I'm not sure about that. I don't know. It's a very strange system. But naturally, you expect that it's about nationals of a country, citizens of a country. Gross domestic product, GDP, we talked about this. It's the same as GNP plus net factors income. You take all the income that is outside the country out, and you put all the incomes that is made inside the country in, and you'll have your GDP. Domestically produced measures of gross profit. Total income earned by US residents. So green card holders are also included, is GNP. Private disposable income, that's GDP plus net factor income plus transfer payments received from the government plus interest payments on government debt minus taxes. Now, private disposable income, these are all like accounting definitions, but I suggest you use like a common sense. You should make sure that this makes sense to you. Let's talk about this. We're talking about private disposable income. So what are those? That's the GDP, what the money we made, the money we actually, what we produced, plus net factor income, what we produce outside the country. If an American goes to the University of Tokyo and becomes an independent instructor there, or University of Paris or University of Shanghai, that will be income made by an American. That would be net factor income. Plus transfer payments received from the government. You could also make money from the government. If the government, for example, sending us checks because we're staying at home during lockdowns, that's disposable income. You're going to be able to enjoy it. Plus interest payments on government debts. Who owns the government debts? We do. The government owes people money. And a huge part of the government's budget actually is to pay interest on the money that they owe. There is a very great movie. There's a really good movie directed by Clint Eastwood. It's called Flags of Our Fathers. It's about a few US Marines who survived the battle, I think, in the Pacific. And they're heroes, they're national heroes. And the government brings them back and asks them to go around and talk to people, like have these stadiums full of people would cheer for you, you're a national hero, and ask people to buy these bonds, these government bonds. Technically, ask people to owe us, to lend us money, because we need money. The war, we need money to run the war. And when you go there, just people wave at you and they're all like cheering for you. You ask them, good people, please buy these bonds. On those bonds, the government has to pay interest. That's interest payments on government debt. Many people believe that, for example, some governments actually had huge issues because of this. Many wars started, especially in very like strange systems of governments. Some governments actually had to go to war to not pay these debts. Also, this has been a problem ever since the days of antiquity. Governments try their best to find a way to not pay these interest payments. And of course, minus taxes. We also have to pay taxes to the government. I think it was SNL. SNL, they had this really good joke. They said government is like Amazon Prime. If you use the services, you need to pay a subscription fee. I really like that definition of taxes. So you're using certain services, you have to pay an annual subscription fee. That's taxes. Net government income, taxes comes into the government, transfers goes out. You have to like pay a lot of people. Governments have a lot, like many mouths to feed. Also, you have to pay interest for all the money that you borrowed. For decades, you've been borrowing a lot of money, so you have to pay interests on those. So this was another way to look at GDP. This is very important. Make sure you understand how it works, because on the exam, your exam is most definitely is going to be open book. So I'm going to be very innovative, and I'm not going to just give you like, this is GDP, this is net factor, and this is everything else. Find me private disposable income. You need to understand each separate part, each component, to be able to answer the questions. And also net government income. Again, assume a government is a person. Its income is taxes. It also has to pay a lot of money to a lot of people, and also it has to pay interest on all the money that it borrowed, that he or she borrowed. Any questions so far? No? Great. Now, nominal versus real GDP. Have you ever asked like your grandparents how much they bought their houses for, or how much they paid to buy their car, or how much they paid for college tuition? They would say like, I spent $500 to get my degree. And you were like, what? $500? What? I have to pay like a couple of $1,000 just to enroll in one course. What's going on here? This is because the value of money over time keeps going down. Many reasons, but the most interesting reasons is that the government itself keeps devaluating the money. Therefore, the money itself will become less money, less important, less good over time. More money is going to be printed. More and more is going to be printed and thrown into the society. That means the money itself will lose its value. Now, we have real values and we have nominal values. Nominal values, the prices we're facing every day. If you go to Walmart, you want to buy, let's say, a watermelon, you'll see a price tag on it. That's the nominal value. But then, if you want to compare the watermelon you bought today with the watermelon you bought last year, you need to consider that money value keep going down. Money is not as worthy as it was last year. Like you have inflation. Inflation keeps devaluating the money. Money is worse. So that's why you need real you need a real value, which considers this effect of time on money itself. And nominal value is a measure at current market right now. A real variable is a measure in terms of quantities of actual goods and services. $100 right now will get you, let's say, 10 watermelons. $100 50 years ago would have given you 100 watermelons. What you care about is your watermelon. You like watermelon, so you pay for it. But then the value keeps going down, the value of the money, and you have to pay more and more and more. But a real variable only cares about the good, the quantities of actual goods and services. So this is very important because it enables us to actually see what's happening by taking the effect of money's value. Now, real GDP, nominal GDP over price level. Price level is how much prices are rising from this year to the next year. If 2005, now, when we want to find price level, we define a base year. We bring all the prices down to that level to be able to just compare quantities. If 2005 is the base year, then real GDP for the year 2014, for example, in that apples and oranges example, is prices, apples in 2005 multiplied by quantities of apples in 2014. You only use the prices of the base year because you're not interested in the change in prices. You're interested in the changes in quantities. You want to know how many more goods we're producing, sorry. So you use prices of the base year. Now, there are many issues about this. For example, in EC 202, talked about this in detail. For example, values of goods change. People in 2005 could have been just crazy about apples. Just eat an apple a day so that you don't see a doctor. In 2014, people may not be interested in not seeing a doctor anymore. So they would not buy that many apples. So value of apples would go down. But you're still using the prices of apple from 2005. So these are problems associated with real values and base year system. Raw data on GDP tends to fall in cold and snowy months. Therefore, economic statistics are seasonally adjusted to account for regular seasonal fluctuations within a year. That's also like because yeah, in snowy months, raw data is going down. Therefore, you adjust the values. You seasonally adjust them to account for regular seasonal fluctuations within a year. Chain weighted. Another one, if prices of some important goods change dramatically relative to other goods using a base year, yes, this is the problem with the base year. We talked about this. If prices change dramatically, using a base year can produce misleading results. Chain-weighted measures of GDP, therefore we use chain-weighted measures to be able to counter this problem. Measuring inflation. Do everyone know what's inflation from EC 202 or courses before? Money's worth keeps going down. The rate that money's worth keeps going down is called inflation. Every year, let's say 10% the money is worse is gone. So that's your inflation is like 10%. If, for example, with my fixed income, I could buy 10 of these last year, and this year I can only buy 9 of these. That means 10% of the value of my money, if my fixed income is fixed, 10% of the value of the money is gone. That's like, then we say like inflation rate is going up by, I think, around 11% or something. If it goes from 100 to 90, then divided by 90, you'll find the result. It's around 12%. You can say inflation is around 12%. Price indices are measures of price level. GDP deflator is very similar to inflation we use to find price level, or implicit price deflator. Consumer price index is another measure we use to see how prices change. These are basically very close to each other, but they have some very important differences. For example, consumer price indices, they're about the consumption basket, what families buy. They're important because they have a direct link to the family's welfare. You're talking about consumers. So bread, consumer price. Rent I pay to my landlord, consumer price. These are all included. But GDP deflator is about the country's economy. So if I buy a French baguette, the French baguette is in consumer price index, but it's a French thing. It wasn't made here. Let's say my baguettes are every morning brought to me from Paris. Such a taste, like I have such high taste that I only buy bread when it's directly brought to me from France. But that baguette is not in GDP deflator. Why? Because it's made in France. So these are the differences. Again, in EC 202, we talked about this in detail. GDP deflator for year Y, you can see nominal GDP over real GDP. PCE deflator, nominal PCE, personal consumption expenditure deflator. These are just formulas. You don't need to worry about formulas, because even if your exam is not open book, I don't believe in making the students memorizing formulas. So you'll be given the formulas no matter what. Don't worry about formulas, but make sure you learn, why do we do this? Why do we put nominal on denominator and real on denominator? What does this mean? What does every part of it tell us? A measure of average prices of consumer goods and services. That's consumer index we talked about. Again, from EC 202, consumer price index. It's how much prices are going up compared to the base year. Now, overestimates of cost of living. CPI is used in determining labor contracts and government payments, such as Social Security benefits. A study led by Michael Boskin shows us that increases in CPI overstate increases in the cost of living by 1 percentage point. Measurement errors in the CPI could have important implications. Because people's taste themselves change, it could not always be because of inflation. Sometimes people just change their own taste. This could change the price of gas. People used to travel a lot. Now they don't want to travel. Gas prices would go down. It's not always because of inflation, or there could be some geopolitical crisis that disrupts the oil market. Gas prices would go up. Well, there is no inflation, so this could be misleading again. Inflation rate, on the other hand, is the rate of change of price level over a particular period. So price this year minus last year divided by price last year. And inflation is represented by the letter pi, or change in prices over the price of last year. So again, if I have, let's say, if I have $100 and I can buy 10 phones this year, next year I can buy, let's say, 11 phones. Not 11, not like, let's say the price of this is 10 this year. Next year, it's 11. What's the inflation rate? 10, the price level is 10 this year. Next year, price is 11. What's the inflation rate? 10, it's 11 minus 10, which is 1, divided by 10, which then would be 1 over 10, but we're talking about the percentage. So that's 0.1 multiplied by 100. That's 10%. That's when we say inflation rate is 10%. This is not, this is price level. This is wrong. The P stands for price, not period. So you can see the inflation data here. Inflation 1950s. This is very interesting. Oh, this is the beginning of 1950s. Let's jump. And this is the crisis in the early 70s, and also the oil crisis in 1980s. Then it fell. It's fairly stable all the way to 2008. You can see there is a drop in 2008 because that's what happened when there is a financial crisis. Because people don't spend money that much, inflation would go down. So inflation is not always some scheme that politicians use to devalue money. Sometimes it's natural. Sometimes people just stop like spending money and just scared or something, and inflation goes down, even in the negative, which is very dangerous. It's called deflation. In this point, you can see that's the bailout programs and all the spending by the government trying to bring the economy back to life. Keynesians, it goes up again and it stays up. In economy, in engineering, anywhere, if you want to find a percentage change in something, that's the new value minus the old value divided by the old value. You want to know how much something changed compared to its starting value. For example, if I like, I'm not growing anymore, but if I was like 10 years old and I would grow some inches in height compared to my last year when I was 9, that's how you find how much percentage change I'm experiencing. A 2-year-old grows much faster than a 10-year-old in terms of percentage change. The reason we use percentage change because we want to compare something with itself. We don't want to compare how much in absolute measures the change happened. We want to compare everyone to itself. So GDP change, for example, 5%. We're comparing United States economy to United States economy. We're not comparing United States with China or with Bolivia. It's a tiny country, for example. Now, Changes in nominal GDP, you can see change in the price level, price plus change in real GDP. Basically, you find the change in real GDP, and after that, you add changes in price level. So that's change in nominal GDP, which doesn't really matter. Change in nominal GDP, not important. Change in real GDP, very important. Change in price level, also important. Percentage change method and inflation rate. Growth rate of nominal GDP minus growth rate of real GDP also gives us the inflation rate, because the percentage change in price level is the inflation rate. Then by subtracting nominal versus real value growth rate, you can find the inflation rate. You can also write this as real growth rate is equal, or real interest rate. This is a very important financial formula. We say real interest rate equals nominal interest rate minus inflation rate. So for example, if I want to borrow someone money, lend someone money, one of you tell me that I will pay you 20% interest if you lend me your money. 20% interest is not the 20% profits I'll be making. I won't be making 20% money right away. No, I will make as much when I have the 20% and I deduct the inflation rate, because while you're holding my money, because of inflation, my money's value is going down. It's being depreciated. So I have to also consider that. This is a very important formula, which is important everywhere, especially in finance. The unemployment rate is the percentage of people in the civilian population who want to work but can't find job, but who do not have jobs. The Bureau of Labor Statistics classifies them adult over 16. Each adult over 16 into 3 possible categories. They're either employed, they are unemployed, or they're just not in the labor force. If you're a student, you're not in the labor force. You don't want to work. You want to first finish your study, to invest in your human capital, to be more prepared, and then after you graduate, you will enter the workforce. Those who would live to work, discouraged workers, yes. Those who would like to work, not those who would live to work. Who is designing these slides? Very funny. Those who would like to work, but they have given up hope because they have tried for so long, they couldn't find job, and they just, yeah, I'm no longer looking for work. They just gave up. They voluntarily left the labor force. They're discouraged. They are also not in the labor force. These are again EC202. Labor force, number of employed plus number of unemployed, and labor force. Labor force is basically the like all the active and potential economically active population. People who can work in total. That's your labor force. Now, people who can work or are willing to work, in other words, are divided into 2 groups: people who are already working or people who are looking for work. That's your labor force, number of employed plus number of unemployed, or labor force. Unemployment rate would be number of unemployed over your labor force. I don't like these formulas. It doesn't make sense. Lots of problems in these slides. Make sure you double check with the book about these formulas, because I'm pretty sure this one should be number of unemployed over your labor force, not number of employed. Like 5% of the labor force is not finding any work, so that's your unemployment rate. There are lots of issues with these slides. Make sure you double check the formulas with the book. And also ask me if you're still not making sense of something. Labor force participation. You know what? I will post my EC 202 slides as well, so that you can make just double check everything. That's a better, I trust those. I've been working with those for a long time. I fixed every problem in those. Labor force participation rate is showing you how much economically active or economically prepared your population is. Basically, it shows how much of your adult population are in the labor force. They are either working or they're trying to find work. That's your participation rate. For example, if a country is more more focusing on women's participation in the economy, labor force is higher. Why? Because women in many countries, they believe that they should be economically active. They should go to like school, finish high school, then they should go to work, and they should like help with the running of the family unit, the household. But in some countries, women, they believe that they shouldn't go to work. They should just stay home and just prepare their children for adulthood. These are like cultural differences and like gradually changes. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down because of economic also situation. If economy goes down, more women may decide to join the labor force. If the economy goes up and income goes up, sometimes people would decide to have like more children, and taking care of children is a very difficult thing. So one of the spouses need to stay home and take care of children. These are all like economic and also non-economic processes that lead to these decisions. That's the participation rate. Employment ratio is how much of the population is employed, not the labor force, the total adult population. Labor force are those who are working and plus those who are willing to work, but they can't find work. Not included in those people who are adults, but they just don't want to work. They just want to stay home. And these are the figures. You can see 36% not in the labor force. They're either retired or like students or many things. Unemployed, 7.8%. This is not good. 8% unemployment in 2013. I didn't expect that. That's too high. Employed, yes, this is 8% of the total adult population. First, you need to deduct those who are not in the labor force. So if let's find the unemployment rate. Let's say how many people are let's find the unemployment rate in 2013. How many people are in the labor force in total? 12.3 plus 144.8. This is the total number of people in the labor force. 144 million, they're already working. 12 million, they're unemployed. They're looking for work. They're filing out applications. Of this number, let's save this. 12.3 million, they don't have job. So let's see what is our unemployment rate. It's again 7%. Yeah, this is the unemployment rate. I didn't expect this. 7.8%. This is the unemployment rate. Yeah, that's not good. Very interesting. Yeah, this means the unemployment in 2013 was too high. All right. Interesting. I'm pretty sure it was like 3% or even less than 3% in like 2018 or 19. Okay, macroeconomics and the news. Bureau of Labor Statistics. You always hear on the news, if you like follow the news, sometimes you hear that unemployment rate is 5% or 8% in that case, or 3%. This means 3% of those people who are economically active, who are willing to work, they don't have a job. And again, this is why we care about unemployment rate. Unemployment rate is a very important social indicator. Why? Because why do people work? People work because they need a job to sustain themselves. Nobody wants to go to work just to have fun. They want to go to work because they need the money. And if they're not finding that money, that means their life is hurting. They can't buy food. They can't pay for their kids' school. They can't pay rent. They'll end up homeless. These are very serious issues. So that's why we care a lot about unemployment rate. Household survey and survey of business establishment. The two surveys sometimes give a different picture of labor market conditions due to household survey count workers. And these are all the things about like how it's done. Nothing specifically economic in here. Now, interest rate. Let's see. Yep, this is our last topic today. Interest rate. Interest rate is the rent. I really love this definition of in economics. We call this rent. It's the rent that you pay to borrow money. The price of money. Very, very nice. When I want to borrow money from someone, that someone needs to be incentivized. Why should I lend money to everyone? Like, why should the bank lend money to me? Is the bank a charity? No. The bank lend me money. I take a loan from the bank. With that loan, I pay for my school to be able to get a degree that I can then go to work. With that money that I got from the bank, I can invest, I can do something. But in return, I need to give back something so that that person is incentivized to deal with me. That is interest rate. This is the cost of borrowing or the price paid for the rental of funds. That's the price of money. You pay someone an interest so that someone would lend you money. Interest rates are returns for holding debt securities such as bonds. If I issue a bond, for example, the US government issues bonds, people buy them. On that bond is a piece of paper. It's signed by the United States president, for example, by the president. On that bond, it says, dear citizens, if you purchase this bond, this is like a $1,000 bond, this means that I owe you $1,000 and also 5% interest every year. That means 5% of that $1,000 I have to pay you as interest every year until I buy this bond back. Or in other words, I just give you your $1,000 and ask you to give me back the piece of paper. So bond is basically, it's a bond. It's a bond between like marriage is a bond between two loved ones. A bond in economics is a bond between the government and its citizens who owe them money. That's a bond. Now, interest rates are written on them. Now, something that, for example, everyone who's taking a loan needs to consider very carefully is that the interest rate needs to be higher than the return on investment. If I take a loan, let's say it's $100,000, 5% interest rate every year. That's multiplied by 5%. That means every year I have to pay $5,000. I also own $100,000. I get that $100,000 loan, let's say it's a student loan, and I'll go get a degree in, let's say, some major that I really like, but there is no job for it in North Carolina. What happens later is that after I graduate, I have to pay $5,000 every month as interest, for example, but I don't have work. I have to go work for, let's say, a business that pays me $4,000 every month. So I'm making $4,000 and I have to make a $5,000 interest payment. You see, at the end of the month, I'm missing money. While if I, for example, let's say there is this fancy high-tech corporation in North Carolina that is hiring people with engineering, like mechanical engineering degree, I would get a mechanical engineering degree. With the money I got from the bank, 100,000, and they pay me every month, let's say $12,000 every month. That's, I'm making six figures now. And I then pay $5,000 of that income back to the bank as interest payment. It's $7,000 left for me now. Now every month I have $7,000 left in my pocket that I can spend on the rent. I can buy a car. I can go see the world, everything. This is a very important issue. Like right now, the whole issue of student debt crisis, it's very very much on the news. And some people, they believe that, well, you borrowed money, you have to pay it back. Why should the taxpayer pay it back for you? Some people are saying, well, in the first place, the government should have protected like 18-year-olds or 17-year-olds from being preyed upon by these banks. Because like I myself, I worked at my dad's business, and I tell you, bankers, they're really good at selling you loans. Like I myself, I have a degree in finance. I knew this stuff. And I was working in another city like 5-6 years ago. And my mom called me and says, come home. Your dad, I think, is in trouble. I came home and I looked at my dad's books, like accounts, and I was like, what have they done to him? Bankers, like my dad, he was an experienced engineer. He knew the market. He was not some 15-year-old child that can be taken advantage of by a bank. But they were really good. They actually they persuaded him to get a really bad loan, and he was like, he went under a lot of pressure. He suffered a lot of troubles to pay back that loan. And now imagine, now you're dealing with 18-year-olds just right out of high school, that they're facing, okay, you go study this major that you love, and don't worry, we will pay for it. So this is very important when it comes to interest rate. Later on, you have to make like financial decisions. If you want to buy a house, for example, you need to make sure that this loan you're taking makes sense. If you want to get a loan and then start a business, you have to run all these calculations to make sure that after you started your business, you open the shop, you'll make enough money to not only pay back the bank, but also have a healthy profit left in your pocket. Otherwise, don't bother. Why would you do that? This is why interest rate, very important. Returns that you have to pay back. That's your obligation. And if you're not able to pay back your obligations, you're bankrupt. So when you hear people say that, like for that corporation, for example, declared bankruptcy, that means that that corporation just couldn't pay back all the money that it owned. Even if like they sell everything, all the offices, even the pens and pencils, if they sell everything, they still wouldn't be able to pay back all the money that they owned and all the interest that they owned. That's when they declare bankruptcy. Interest rates that receive media attentions, prime rate, federal funds rate, London interbank offered rate, treasury bill. These are different, like for specific transactions. 10-year treasury bond rate, federal home loan mortgage corporation rate. This is important. If you purchase a house, you have to make payments according to this, and you have to have the income to make payments. In 2008, the Great Recession was mainly because people received all those empty loans, and nobody, like the idea behind that was that, well, people will always make payments on their homes. They will never lose their homes. Nobody told them, but what if they're just not making that money? They just can't create money out of nowhere. They're getting all these loans. What if they can't make it? They can't pay it back. That caused the 2008 Great Recession. People couldn't pay the interests. And it started a domino effect that destroyed the whole financial sector. And nominal interest rates, when it's just nominal. You go to the bank tells you if you deposit your money in our saving account, we'll pay you a 5% nominal interest rate. That's what they give you. Real interest rate is when you take the inflation rate from the nominal. If you take the inflation rate from the nominal, the ex ante real interest rate, when you take the inflation rate from the nominal, you'll have the real interest rate. The real interest rate is what's important. It shows how much value is added to the money that you're lending people. Go ahead, Prem.
Yeah, I was just wondering,
Just 1 second. Go ahead.
I was just wondering out of curiosity. So, would it be better to get a nominal interest rate then, as opposed to like, I guess if you were to go for a 5% nominal interest rate or a 5% real interest rate, would it be better to go for the 5% nominal because if your purchasing power, because say you have inflation and you have to do the real interest rate, you'd actually be paying more in the future.
What do you mean we go for nominal? Are you borrowing money or are you lending money?
That borrowing.
You want to borrow money from the bank.
Yeah.
So what is your interest when you want to borrow money from someone?
I mean, I guess that's the cost of taking the money, right?
When I want to borrow money from someone, my interest is to pay as little as possible back, right? So I try to minimize the return on that loan. So assuming we have inflation rate, I would go for the nominal 5% because then nominal, I would deduct the inflation rate from it. So if inflation rate is 2%, they offer me, here's a loan with 5% nominal interest rate, and here's a loan with 5% real interest rate. If I take the nominal one, 5% minus 2% inflation, I end up with 3% real interest rate. I'll have to pay back 3%. But the other one, it's a 5%. So I have to pay back more. And I don't like to. I like to pay as little as
Okay.
possible.
Okay, so you want to go for the real interest rate then?
Yeah. You want to go for the nominal interest rate, 5%. Because the inflation rate will bring it even down. It will
Okay.
bring the real value down.
Okay.
You get,
I think I get it. Like the yeah, okay, yeah, because the nominal, yeah, that's just like basically kind of the value that's in like kind of just being presented, whereas the real interest rate that's kind of being adjusted. And so
the nominal is being adjusted. The real one is just being
yeah, I mean that would be 5%. It'd be 5%, it'd be 5% flat the entire time.
Yeah.
If you had your money was inflated, because it's worth less, you're actually spending kind of less in terms of value.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So always remember, because the situations will be completely opposite if you're about to lend money to someone else. If you're about to, for example, deposit money in your bank, that's almost the same as lending money to your bank. Then you want the higher interest rate. You want the real interest rate to end up being the highest. So first of all, remember problem solving. First of all, define the problem. Make sure you know what you want. What is it that you want? Then according to that problem, compare the final outcomes, the final money that you have to pay or you're getting. Try to maximize it. Go ahead, Faye. Lei.
Just Faye. Yeah. So do you have the option like to choose between nominal interest rate and real interest rate, or is up to like who decide which interest rate you have to pay?
You have to pay nominally the nominal interest rate, but in reality, the real interest rate. Let me explain further.
Yeah.
Not when so like someone says like if someone says I am nominally your friend, compared to someone who's saying I am really your friend, which one is your friend?
The real friend?
The real friend. This is exactly the case here. Nominal interest rate is just nominal. That's not real. That's not the exact values. The real one is the real values. So you care about the real one. The nominal one is what the bank tells you.
Okay.
You have to compare, you have to then deduct inflation rate yourself to find the real value. That's the real thing. That's your real friend. So you don't trust someone if that person is your nominal friend. You trust him or her if that person is your real friend. That's the same argument with interest rate.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So real interest rate, real, very important, is the amount of extra purchasing power a lender must be paid for the rental of his or her money. So if I give you, let's say, I don't have any cash here. If I give you, let's say this is a dollar bill. If I give you this dollar bill, then you have to pay me this, not only this dollar bill back, but also some money on it. Let's say another dollar bill. That one more dollar bill would be the interest rate, the real extra purchasing power that you're getting. The ex-ante real interest rate is adjusted for expected changes in the price level. That's when you talk about future inflation. This is very important again. In some contracts, there is no such thing. In some contracts, there is no such thing. For example, when if you take a loan from the bank, if there is no ex-ante real interest rate fixed in the contract, for example, compared to future inflation, then future inflation would affect how much money you will pay back. If it's a business loan, for example, you take it like $2 million loan to expand your current agricultural business, then future inflation rates will also affect. These are all very important things. Make sure you get them. I will give you a very interesting question on your midterm exam. Definitely a question on the exam. Make sure you get everything about interest rate, because it's very important for your personal finances. And also if you work for a company, if you own a company, it's important for everyone. If you have any dealing with money, you have to know everything about interest rate, especially when you're dealing with bankers, because I myself have seen lots of people, like they even once they even actually kind of hurt me. They're really good. They actually once did something really funny to me. So you'll be getting a really interesting question on your midterm exam. Make sure you get this. This is a very important topic. Now, Fisher equation, real versus nominal interest rate. This is the Fisher equation we were talking about. The real interest rate is when you take out, these slides are all wrong. R is real interest rate. If you're using this, make sure you make the adjustment. I should write a really angry email to these guys. R is real interest rate, I is nominal interest rate, and pi is expected. So real interest rate is when you deduct inflation rate from nominal interest rate. This here, R stands for real, I nominal, pi inflation. So fix this. Make sure you don't get misguided by this. Yeah, you can see here, for example, for a 1-year loan with a 4% nominal interest rate, and you expect the inflation to be 6%, then 4% minus 6%, that's a 2% minus. You see? If someone offers you this, you'll definitely take it. You have to pay 4% interest rates, but inflation rate is itself is 6%. So 6% of the money's worth is gone. So in reality, you don't have to pay any interest rate. Instead, you actually walk away with some more money. So this is a very good deal. The real interest rate is negative. It means like a bank is actually giving you money, go have fun. Of course, no one will give you this loan, but if in some rare situations, banks can be really hurt. For example, if you get a loan and then there's a huge financial change and then there's a huge inflation rate, that's when you'll end up with inflation higher than nominal interest rate, and therefore that means negative real interest rate. That means you're not even paying them anything. You're actually walking away with more money. So that's good. When the real interest rate is low, there are greater incentives to borrow and invest, but fewer to lend. Why should I lend my money? If real interest rate is negative, no one will give you any loan, because no one likes to just hand out money unless like it's your parents. Your parents may give you money from out of love, but not the bank. The bank doesn't love you, so no money for you. So very important discussion. Now, real and nominal interest rate. Credit markets are where households and businesses get funds from each other. Credit markets are kind of a place where those who have money meet those who need money, and then they trade in exchange with interest. Assume this. An old couple, they worked their entire life and now they have a lot of money saved, $10 million or like $2 million. But they really need that money. They can't start a business. They're old and they want to retire, go travel around the world, and they just need some income monthly to be able to see the world, enjoy themselves after years of hard work. That's one. On the other hand, you have a young couple, two people who just started life together. They have lots of plans, they're working, but they don't have a house. They want to buy a house. They want to start new adventures, like do this, do that, but they need money. They're working, they have no money saved, so they need a lot of cash to buy a house, for example. What happens is that thanks to the credit market, the old couple gets to meet the young couple. They give them their saving, and then in return, the young couple pays them every month some money as interest. They both walk away happy. This is the basic, in theory, the theory of credit market. In reality, of course, that's not the case. In reality, because credit markets are supposed to be non-profits, like banks, they're supposed to be just an intermediary. They're not supposed to make any money for themselves, or stock markets, or all these credit markets. Because they actually do make money for themselves, they are incentivized to do crazy things and cause global economy to crash. For example, in 2008, you had the problem with bonuses. These executives of these financial corporations, they're supposed to just work as an intermediary and get a monthly salary just to get by, which is very normal. But in reality, under work contract, it was said that like the more people borrow money from you, the more money you're going to get. So they went around and they started giving people money without even making sure that they can pay it back, and bad. The whole world economy collapsed. So credit markets are where households and businesses, they get to meet each other and trade funds with each other, because the real interest rate reflects the real cost of borrowing. It is likely to be a better indicator of the incentives to borrow. The real interest rate, real friend. Nominal interest rate, nominal friend. You don't trust your nominal friend, you trust your real friend. So real interest rate is a better indicator of the incentives to borrow, invest, and lend in credit markets than nominal interest rate. And this is our last. You can see the differences between the real interest rate and the nominal. The nominal is almost always higher than real, unless there is a negative inflation, which is a rare situation. We'll talk about it later. It's not that important. But in almost every scenario, nominal is always higher. But then after you deduct inflation, you can see that real is what? So, any questions? If there is no questions, thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow. And if you have any questions, I can stay and we can talk a little bit. Take care.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone has any questions?
Yeah, I had a quick question.
Go ahead.
It's kind of like personal, but I sent you like a couple of emails like in the last couple of days. Is that like the best way to reach out to you through the?
Oh, yeah. I received your email just before the class and I had my eyelash going into my eye. So I was like in a hurry, washing my face. Everything was, I'm sorry I couldn't respond.
No,
in
you're
time, but
fine.
yeah, emails are good. Emails are, I got
Okay,
your
emails
email.
are good. Okay, great. And there's no date for the midterm yet.
Not
Correct.
yet. I'll let you know before.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.
I wanted to let you know that I think I was a little bit late for the attendance because my Wi-Fi, I actually changed my router last night. And so I was having some trouble
Yeah,
connecting.
I didn't take attendance today because like it's a random thing.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, to
I thought it
save
was-
class time, it's just a random thing. So you're fine today. Don't worry about it.
Okay. All right, then. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Take care.
You too.
Hi, I
Thanks,
have a
man. Have a good one.
Okay, so wait. So for the textbook, is it gonna be connected with the homework, right? So
Yeah, I'll
you're
let you
gonna
know,
like
like-
post the link later, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
You
'cause
got
I
the
checked-
textbooks, right? You got the name of the textbook, right?
Yeah, I saw the name, but like, cause you said that like we're gonna have homework, so I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
thinking like maybe the homework will link with the all in access textbook. So I just want to check before I look up and everything.
Yep. Yep. I'll let
And you will
know.
post the link later, right? Because we don't
Yes.
have homework this week yet.
Yes. Yes. No,
Awesome,
no
that's all
homeworks.
my questions.
Yep.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too. Thanks. Take care.
Bye.